Today I want to share with you my honest advice for someone who wants to get rich. Most of us spend our lives asking the wrong question. We ask, how do people get rich? And because we're asking the wrong question, we end up looking in all the wrong places. We study the teenager who sold an app for millions, the startup founders who sold the company and it became worth billions overnight, the employee whose stock options changed their life suddenly, unexpectedly. But these stories are extraordinary precisely because they almost never happen. The strange thing is, if you simply remove those headlines from the world tomorrow, millions of people would still become wealthier over the next 10 or 20 years. Not because they suddenly discovered a secret, and not because they were luckier than everyone else, but because they followed the pattern that's so ordinary we barely even notice it. The pattern that has simply produced doctors, engineers, skilled tradespeople, executives, small business owners, researchers, pilots, and countless other professionals who have built financial security 1 year at a time. We have become fascinated by exceptional outcomes while almost completely ignoring the process that creates the wealthy people in the first place. And once you see that process, it's surprisingly difficult to look at success the same way ever again. If you've ever wondered why some people get richer every year while others work just as hard and never quite catch up, it's easy to land on the wrong answer. Everywhere we look, we're shown the outliers. The teenager who sells an app for 20 million, the early employee whose options turn into a house or two or three, the founders whose company explodes overnight. Great stories, true stories, and a little dangerous because they teach us that wealth shows up as one extraordinary event. Believe that, and getting rich starts to feel like buying a lottery ticket. You hope, you wait, maybe you work hard, and maybe the lightning strikes. Except for every headline, there are thousands of quiet failures we never hear about. We just don't go looking for those, and nobody says that they failed 15 times before their business took off. So let's look past the headlines instead, at physicians, engineers, electricians, pilots, small business owners. And you notice the same thing. Almost none of them got rich because of one incredible day. Most got rich because of several thousand ordinary ones. I used to assume that successful people simply made smarter decisions. Then I paid closer attention and noticed their real edge wasn't the genius, confidence, or timing. It was duration. They stuck with one path long enough that the improvement became impossible to ignore. That changed the question for me from how do I find the one life-changing break to how do I become a little more valuable next year than I am today. The Japanese have a word for that, kaizen, continuous improvement, small gains repeated for a long time. It sounds almost too modest next to stories of overnight millionaires. But stretch an hour of learning across a decade and it becomes expertise. Expertise earns trust, trust opens doors, doors lead to higher income. Simply add decent financial habits and you get wealth. But notice the order. Most people think wealth starts with money. I think it starts with value. Money just shows up afterwards, like the receipts, which gets us to the framework underneath nearly every self-made success story. Yes, even the millionaires and billionaires. Search, commit, improve. Let's start with the first one, search. When I say search, I don't mean scrolling job boards hoping something catches your eye. I mean becoming a student of opportunity. Most of us spend more time researching our next TV than the career we'll do for the next 30 or 40 years. We'll watch hours of reviews before buying a laptop. We'll compare a dozen hotels for a weekend trip away. Then back into the biggest financial decision of our lives, almost by accident. We study the same things that our friends studied. We take the first offer that shows up. We stay put because leaving feels uncomfortable. Human, but passive, and passive decisions rarely produce extraordinary outcomes. So get curious, not about how people got lucky, but about how people typically succeed. You can research almost any profession now. What people actually do all day, what it pays at 5 years, at 10, at 20, who hires for it. You don't have to guess that, you can investigate. For most of high achievers, you can track their entire professional trajectory on LinkedIn profile. Ask a better question, not what's the fastest way to get rich, but what careers consistently produce the life I want. That moves you from fantasy to probability. Maybe you don't need a large yacht. Maybe you simply want to support a family comfortably, save aggressively, and travel sometimes. There are dozens of paths to that. Engineering, medicine, accounting, aviation, the trades, sales, construction management, software engineering. None of them make headlines. They're just where thousands of ordinary people quietly build good lives. That's the case study you want, the typical one, not the exceptional one. No, not every engineer gets rich. Not every physician, not every entrepreneur. Nothing is guaranteed. But success isn't binary. It's a spectrum, and we measure our starting line against someone else's finish line. Someone earning $40,000 a year assumes that without $1 million exit, they have failed. But simply picture them instead at 90 or 165 years out or 7 years. Not a magazine cover, but still a drastically changed life. Real wealth built through better decisions, not one dramatic event. This is also where people stall. They find a promising path, then they freeze because it looks long. Years of school, years of experience before you hit the senior level. But ask yourself, 10 years from now, how old will you be anyway? The years pass regardless. The only choice is whether you arrive there with nothing new or with a rare set of skills. But eventually, you have to stop exploring and decide. Searching is fun, everything feels possible, but there's a trap. You can stay so busy looking that you never build anything. Curiosity is great, but commitment is what turns curiosity into capability and capability into income. Most successful people didn't always know where they were headed. They changed lanes, made mistakes. What changed things wasn't clarity. It was staying long enough to get good, long enough to earn trust, long enough that opportunities started finding them. That phrase, long enough, might be the most important one here because we're terrible at estimating how long real progress takes. We live in a culture that worships speed. Lose 10 pounds in 30 days, learn a language in 6 weeks. Reality expands time, it does not compress it. Think of a surgeon, the architect, the master electrician. Almost none of them got there in 3 years. Most spent 10, 20, sometimes 30, not because they were slow, but because mastery is slow by nature. Here's the comforting part. The time passes whether you improve or not. You'll wake up 10 years older regardless. The only real question is who you'll be when you get there. I used to think successful people had something I lacked. A higher IQ, better connections maybe. But their real edge usually wasn't being better on day 1. It was still being there on day 3000. They allowed time to work for them instead of against them. I want to be careful though. Commitment doesn't mean refusing to change course when the evidence says that you should. If your industry is dying, if you found something that fits even better to you, change. Commitment isn't dead stubbornness. It's simply refusing to quit just because progress feels slow or seems to be too far away to be worth it. Plenty of people spend 20 or 30 years working. Far fewer spent 20 years deliberately getting better. One person repeats their first or second year 20 times over. Another spends those years reading, practicing, seeking feedback, or finding a mentor. Identical starting points, but unrecognizable 20 years in. Because one simply accumulated time, and the other accumulated capability. It's the capability that actually compounds. Your skills compound, your reputation, your judgment. Eventually, the market starts treating you differently. More responsibilities, bigger problems, a stronger seat at the table, and income tends to follow that, not lead it. Wealth starts way long before anyone becomes actually wealthy. It starts the moment someone stops chasing the shortcut and starts compounding capability and skills instead. But staying isn't enough just on its own. You also have to get a little bit better tomorrow than today. If searching gives you direction and commitment gives you time to get better, improvement is what makes that time worth something. This is where Kaizen stops being a nice word and becomes a way to run your life. Most people make the mistake by picturing continuous improvement as a dramatic overhaul. But Kaizen was never about leaps. It's tomorrow being slightly better than today, not because one day's gain is impressive, but because a few thousand of them eventually are. Improve at your job by one meaningful thing a week, a new concept, a hard project you said yes to, a real conversation with someone more experienced that you can learn from. None of these individual moments change your life alone. Most barely register while they're actually happening, which is why people underrate them so much. We notice the dramatic and miss the gradual, the same way no parent remembers the exact day their kid learned to read. Because there wasn't one day, just thousands of tiny improvement moments. One day, a 3-hour problem takes 30 minutes. Nothing dramatic happened. A few thousand small things did. That's what Kaizen is. That's why it matters financially. The market doesn't pay for effort, it pays for value. Two people can work equally hard. One earns 50,000 and the other 200,000. The gap isn't just straight effort, it's also that one person has built skills worth 4 times as much. Uncomfortable, but hopeful because value can be built. But not infinitely and not identically for everyone. We've all got different strengths. The goal is never to be good at everything. It's to be genuinely valuable at one or two things. You don't need to suddenly be the best in the world. Just more valuable than you were 5 years ago. Because that buys you options. And options might be the most underrated form of wealth there is. Maybe you're already 40 or 50 and it feels like the window has closed. But in 10 years, you'll be 60 regardless. Would you rather meet that future version of yourself with the same skills or a decade more behind you? The calendar doesn't care either way. And the real challenge isn't staying motivated for 10 years. Motivation is unreliable by design. People who actually improve run on routines, not motivation. A chapter before bed, an hour after work, a skilled practice until it stops feeling like practice. Completely ordinary, repeated, for years, until learning stops being something you're trying to do and becomes something that you are. Your identity is going to outlast motivation. Wealth is usually the visible tip of something invisible that's been growing for years. Capability, judgment, reputation, trust, connections. Those are the roots. Money is just the fruit. Most money advice starts in the wrong place. Every bookstore shelf is wall-to-wall budgeting books. Spend less, avoid debt, build an emergency fund, invest consistently. That's all good advice and you should generally do all of it. But here's a question nobody asks. What happens if you're doing all of that perfectly while earning far less than the life you want requires? You can budget like a genius, cut every expense, and you'll improve your situation, but you'll still hit the glass ceiling. You can't cut your way into abundance forever. At some point, growing what comes in matters more than shrinking what goes out. Picture two small businesses. One cuts costs relentlessly, the other also grows revenue every year. Which would you rather own in 20 years? Growth changes everything, and yet in our own lives, we obsess over spending and barely touch the earning side of the conversation. Your career, if you're working for money, is your biggest financial asset. Not your house, not your portfolio, not your 401k. Your ability to earn over decades is the most valuable thing you own. And like any asset, it can be improved with effort. That doesn't mean everyone earns the same. The market values skills unevenly, and some people start with advantages that others don't get. That's the reality. But within your circumstances, you have more influence over your future earning power than it feels like at first. Which is exactly why this framework matters. Search, commit, improve. Search for careers that statistically lead where you want to end up, not the rare headline story. Then, commit to one long enough for the effort to turn into real expertise. Improve continuously, knowing that today's small gains become next year's edges. Do those 3 things and 5 years pass, then 10, then 20, and people start calling you successful. From the outside, it will look sudden. You'll know better. You'll remember the evenings spent studying, the weekends on certifications, the hard projects, the mistakes. None of it was extraordinary alone. But altogether, it eventually was. We're obsessed with the dramatic moments, the viral story, the overnight millionaire. But real life runs a lot more subtle. Most wealth gets built without anyone watching, a year at a time, one promotion at a time, one better decision at a time, repeated until what once looked impossible becomes the natural result of years spent becoming more valuable. So here's my challenge to you. Don't look for a shortcut, look for a path. Today or tomorrow, spend 30 minutes researching a career that interests you. Look past the salary and find people doing that actual work and ask them how they got there. You are not looking for just inspiration. You're looking mostly for evidence. Then choose, not forever, just long enough to give yourself a real shot. Buy the book, take a class, apply for the entry-level role. Tomorrow, start improving, not dramatically, but deliberately. We don't choose our family or our talent or whether lightning strikes for us. We do choose what we do with the hours in front of us. Stack 20 years of that, and those hours become a career. That career becomes earning power, and that earning power becomes wealth. Not because you found a secret, but because you committed to a simple idea. Search, commit, improve. Easy to remember, genuinely hard to live by. The path isn't hidden. Thousands have walked it. The first step is only yours to take. Thank you.